Welcome to A Delhi Love, Ishq Muhabbat Pyaar, the podcast that treats Delhiwalas to captivating conversations on living and loving all things Delhi. Delhi is not just a place, it's a state of mind, an attitude that leaves a mark on everyone who visits or calls it home. I'm Yasmin Kidwai, your host, a documentary filmmaker, former municipal councillor, and at heart, the quintessential Delhi girl. I love how Delhi is both old and new at the same time. I value its history and heritage and love exploring the new aspects of the city we share. I'm no expert, but I grew up in the gullies here, enjoyed public service here, and just like you, shared a deep passion for Delhi's enigmatic soul. Together, let's embrace the delightful contradictions that make Delhi the city it is. After all, around every corner, there must be 1,000 Dastaans to share in this megacity of a million conversations. The poet Sheikh Ibrahim Zauq wrote about his relationship with Delhi in the following words: "Kaun jaye Zauq par Delhi ki galiyan chhodkar." There is so much to love and learn about this ancient city. As we say in the introduction to every episode, Delhi is a city of a million conversations and delightful contradictions. It has 1,000 mystical and mysterious stories hidden in its gullies. Today we join a charming guide, Dr. Navina Jafa, as she helps navigate a voyage through Delhi's Dastaans. Dr. Navina Jafa is a well-known cultural activist, academician and performing artist who has made significant contributions to cultural and academic tourism. She is a Fulbright scholar, heritage consultant and educator, and has been engaged on various platforms to showcase the richness of Indian culture and heritage. Dr. Jafa has also been working on bringing to light the lost and marginalized voices around India's mystical Sufi traditions, including the world of the transgender Hijra community. Her work has also shed light on the oral histories and traditions of the Tawaifs, who were performers of music and dance and embodiments of tehzeeb and sophistication. Today we will delve into the patron-driven mystical and mysterious world of music, dance and spirituality with Dr. Jafa.
What is so interesting about Delhi, because it's been a power center for so long, some which is mythical, some which is imagined, and some which is lived. They say that the 2 Devis, the 22 Sufi saints, and the 5 Bhairavs are the guardians of the city that is constantly expanding. You know, in a mosque, people who are Muslims go to pray, but in our dargahs, everyone can come to play. It's a home of friendship. Kishan Maharaji, the great tabla player from Banaras, and Bismillah Khan Saab, with whom I did a heritage walk in Dal Mandi of Banaras on Tawaifs. So, ek Baltan Bai thi, who had given refuge to Chandrasekhar Azad.
Welcome, Navina ji. I've been really looking forward to our talk together. But before we start, tell me, what's your, how far back do you go back to in Delhi? Are you originally from Delhi?
Well, it's rather interesting because people are educated here, they are born here. I was born in Meghalaya. My father was in the services, so we were roaming around here and there. In fact, my childhood was spent in the West Indies. And then I was deported to the Catholic nuns in Nainital. But Delhi being very close to Badaयूं, and my mother coming from Lakhimpur Kheri in UP, the summers, as usual, were spent in my Nanihal, my maternal grandparents' home. Whereas every second day, because Badaयूं was so much closer to Delhi, we would land up in Badaयूं. So one has actually, but Delhi की बदकिस्मती है कि इतना सब कुछ शहर देता है, बट कभी कोई कहता नहीं है कि हम दिल्ली वाले हैं. But I now say that yes, I'm a daughter of Badaयूं and UP, but दिल से दिल्ली वाली की हूँ.
So tell me, Navina ji, what is you described, I was reading, as a cultural activist. What does that mean?
Cultural technocrat, actually.
Okay.
Well, you have all kinds of technocrat, and I think in culture, what has happened, we have so much of it, and it's everything. Culture is the widest way of human response to natural resources. If you're in a mountain, you will build your house. The birds you hear will impact the way you speak, and then the sounds of nature impact linguistics. Your imagination, your rituals, everything is grounded in the what you wear, how what you eat is grounded in the geographical context. So when you say culture, then you need statistics. And you need statistics on all kinds of things in order to create policies, directions. Unfortunately, this definition hasn't filtered down into the administrative structure. So when you're looking at Department Ministry of Culture, you forget that the handlooms is in the Ministry of Textile, but the performing arts, you have a song and dance division, which is with INB Ministry, Information Ministry. You have the rest of the performing arts in the Ministry of Culture. You have the folk blended with crafts with the Ministry of Textiles. And the circus artists are in the Ministry of Sports. So, if you do not have that idea, so as a cultural technocrat, I really work towards creating this umbrella of understanding what is Sanskriti, other culture, and most of all, because it's not together, you don't have any statistical data. And people have these wide concepts called cultural skill mapping, but they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do because the UNESCO, for instance, talks about all the skills and knowledge as intangible heritage. So if you have a pot, that is tangible क्योंकि वो मूर्त है. That's a form that you can hold. But the craft of making it is intangible. I'm a dancer and I came into this field and now I work with street performers because there's a lot which is going on in crafts, but there's very little going on in the holistic understanding of culture, giving it directions, whether through the a non-profit organization sector or whether it is through government policy and trying to create a value for culture.
Yeah, and that culture is, like you're saying, it's so intangible and it is so holistic that I think it needs to be looked at not only holistically but also, we can't just divide it completely into silos. It has to be taken in a holistic way.
Absolutely.
And seen how, because it permeates almost, I mean,
Everything we do.
Yeah, everything we do. And everything we say, everything we do, from language to dress, it's part of culture. But when we coming to Delhi, Delhi has, you talk and you work so much on Delhi, and I was very interested in understanding this all from you, that Delhi has an ancient past, and it's like, like any other city, like any other old city, it would have a lot of mysteries and stories associated with. Can you share some of them with us?
So, what is so interesting about Delhi? Because it's been a power center for so long, some which is mythical, some which is imagined, and some which is lived. And because it has been the power center there, and the fact that it is very close to the west border of the Himalayas, it is on the Indo-Gangetic plain. It has been a host to so many migrations and continues to be. Today, if we want to look at the population of Delhi, then so much of it is floating population. And we saw that in the COVID migration, that so many people went back. And they're students, there are opportunities. So people come and go in Delhi, and no one, as I said, no one really
belongs.
no one belongs. It's a city that no one wants to own, and yet everyone wants to be here. And in that process of negotiating your spaces here, there are a lot of stories. I'll give you one story of a migratory person. He was a merchant very well in the 70s, 80s, 90s. It's a story which is 21st century story. He was a merchant from Calcutta, and he was wounded. He had an injury that was infected, and it was a gangrene case. And the doctors gave him an answer. ने जवाब दिया कि पैर काटना है. We have to cut your leg. But somebody said you have to go to in Bihar, there's a very famous place where you can go and worship the Mata and Shiva, and he will grant you a boon of life and your leg will be saved. So he didn't only go there, he went to various other places. And one night when he was sleeping, he dreamt that the cure will come from coming to the Kalka temple in Delhi. Now, Kalka Temple is a very interesting historical place because the Mughal Empire, a lot of the courtiers who were Kayas and Kashmiris, and it was a blend of so many communities. They built dharamshalas in the vicinity of the Kalka Temple. The priests, because now you have Nehru Place there, so the whole landscape has changed. So on one side you have Chirag-e-Delhi, where the famous Sufi is there, but on the other side you have the Kalka temple, which has, of course, in both the Navratras, you would not imagine that entire place, which also has non-Hindu populations, they would be celebrating Navratra ka Mela. In fact, in the area which is now called Jamia, they would be walking and celebrating the melas together. And these are records well into the 1940s and 50s. There was such a lot of brotherhood. After partition. Oh, yes, yes. And there was a lot of bonhomie in the communities because it was all about celebration. And Indians are in perpetual celebrations. So anything to give them happiness. And there were the fields where now Nehru Place stands. And the Pandits were owning that land. Now they take turns to Bari Lagti hai for the donations, and now they've expanded. So there's a whole heritage about the Pandits of the Kalka temple. So this man, the merchant from Calcutta, came to Kalka temple, and he requested, and he laid there, and he dharamshala mein rahe, and he did his jap or whatever, and he got cured. And he showed me a scar on his leg that actually proved what his story was. And he was so grateful that उन्होंने संन्यास ले लिया, and he decided that he will go walk like people do the cover once a year or twice a year. But he said he will go and fetch the water in a canastar, in a big can, and it requested the Pandits that he would let that water be used to bathe the Devi. And he came to be called Lal Baba. And he was given a place with a yagya, with a home, right in front of where the sanctum is. And Lal Baba would be with his damru there. And the smoke would be coming out, and he would be doing his meditation. And every day, the water with which the deity is bathed is with that water. Later on, when he became very old, then he started getting followers. And he was given the dharamshala then became his ashram. And there's a huge room where he would ask his disciples to get cans of Ganga water. And now there are three storerooms where the Ganga water is stored. And even after he has passed away, that water is still used. So when I talk, tradition continues. So I'm talking about migration and the constant layering of how heritage is also parampara, which means flowing traditions. It doesn't stop there. Similarly, if you look at Humayun's tomb, for instance, it was under the aegis, under the administration of the Sufi khadims of Hazrat Nizamuddin. And when Lord Curzon took over the upkeep of the Humayun's tomb, then he asked Khwaja Hassan Nizami, who was a great scholar, a Sufi scholar, and he did many, many things for the city. So he was taking a walk with Lord Curzon, and if you go inside the Humayun's tomb, there's one tomb which is called the Barber's tomb. And this is not Babur, the Mughal emperor, but Babur, the hairstylist. Nine.
Yeah, I've seen
So it's called the Barber's tomb. So when I first went with Khwaja Hassan Nizami, I was quite young and very curious. And he took me there and he said, आपको मालूम है कि एक बार हमारे जो वालिद थे वो इस तरीके से आए थे and Lord Curzon was walking with him and he said, do you know that this is called a barber's tomb? And and when my father, my Lord Curzon asked my father, is it really the barber's tomb? He said yes and no. And Lord Curzon, in his very uppity British way, said, trust you natives to be so ambiguous. Either you say yes or it is no. So there are two graves inside that. And he said, Bhai, aisa hua that Humayun was very friendly to a young boy, but he was also very fond of the barber. And the barber was, he said, I will build you this mausoleum. But the young boy, who he was very friendly to, died before the barber. So he was buried there. And so it is and it isn't. तो ये सारी जो मजेदार कहानियां हैं, कुछ किंवदंती है, कुछ सुनी सुनाई है, and how people reimagine heritage landscapes in different way. खूब मिर्च मसाला वगैरह, like I do this heritage walk and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, we'll come to that.
Yeah.
But you were talking of you mentioned that Delhi is a city where a lot of migration and people pass through it. It's always had the reputation of being a spiritual refuge, so to say. A city, it has its secrets and it has this mystical appeal, which we all find very fascinating. It's been a spiritual refuge for almost always.
So there is the different communities imagine the sacredness or the sacred mapping of Delhi in different ways. There are the Sufis believe that Delhi, even though when there's a famous saying about a belief about Delhi that when a Raja, a king, builds a new capital, he doesn't really relish it. He is dethroned. He is dethroned before he can relish it. Okay, so they said that sometimes the idea of power, because you are instituting a kind of eternity about yourself, which human beings should not, because they can't say that they are eternal. And so the spiritual course of nature takes its course. So they say 22 Sufi saints guard the city. 5 bhairavs, that is the form of Shiva. Like one is in Nehru Park, one is behind Purana Kila, then one is towards Bada Hindu Rao, and one is towards, I think, Karol Bagh, etc. And then there are 2 Peet Wali Devis. One is Yogmaya and one is Kalka. And of course, then you have the second layers like the Jhandewalan, the mother of Jhandewalan, and so on and so forth. And then contemporary, you then had Hanuman Mandirs and things like that. But they say that the 2 Devis, the 22 Sufi saints, and the 5 Bhairavs are the guardians of the city that is constantly expanding.
Yeah, and then the when you speak of expanding, the natural openness of the city, has that also kind of contributed? Because interestingly, Delhi, the cities have not built one on top of the other. They've always expanded. Every city has taken in elements and they have not completely destroyed the other city, but expanded. So has that openness and this lack of fortification also led to this?
It's not lack of fortification, because everywhere there were forts built in order to circumscribe and mark the territory.
That part of it.
That particular part.
Because it expanded.
So Delhi, unlike Bombay, which is like a long line,
Yeah.
Delhi is spread out and it is Dil wali Dilli, so it expands, that's how I look at the metaphor.
Yeah, true. And has Delhi's rich history also contributed to this mystical allure, the kind of so where fact and kind of stories mix together?
देखिए कोई भी शहर होता है, human beings are great imagination. They have a lot of imagination, and they always want to make some truth or the other, or some lies or the other. I feel that Indians are great storytellers, and it's also a way of owning land. And give you an example. So there was an ascetic, or supposedly an ascetic. So way back in the 70s, when Turkman Gate was cleaned up by Sanjay Gandhi, at that time, one gentleman, he took refuge in Firozshah Kotla. Okay. And he started praying, and the Djinns and all. So the heritage of the Djinns that comes into the Firozshah Kotla, and then the Ashokan pillar was called the Djinn Khamba and things like that. And everybody who's going there, they seem to have seen a Djinn there. But Firozshah Kotla itself, apart from the history of cricket there, which is there, you have a stepwell which has wonderful catfish, which almost look like Djinns. They're huge catfish. But in 1946, there was even a wonderful dance festival there. And my own guru, Kapila Vatsyan, and it was, she performed in Firozshah Kotla, and no one knows about it. It was the first dance festival of the city.
Really?
Similarly, when you look at the cultural mapping, you forget that communities. So, for instance, Ram Leelas that happen here, or even the Jagran, it's a whole economy. People hire and they ask you when you ring them up in Delhi. It's a huge thing because of the two Devis and so on and so forth. And there are different connectivity. And while people travel across the city in the olden days, people would do pilgrimages. So, for instance, in Kuwar Sham's temple in Chandni Chowk, people would come to Yog Maya temple. Now, Yog Maya is what? It's a peat, and it generates, it's a Devi peat, and it generates multi-layering of that mysticism. It begins with the fact that when Kans was about to kill this little girl, when Krishna was born, that girls are, when he threw the girl up, she came to Delhi. So it is that peat which is Yog Maya temple here. And when during the later Mughals, you started having Phoolon Wali Ki Sair, then it was started, the pankhas that were created, the jalus would start from the Qutub Sahab ki mazar to the Yog Maya, and then would end. And I remember my talk with Khushwant Singh. He actually, I discovered Mehroli with Khushwant Singh when I was studying in Delhi. And he wore a knicker, and he took me all around Mehroli, because Mehroli also has the Sikh history there, Banda Bahadur's history in Mehroli. Yeah. So he was very keen to share the Sikh history, like that of the Tis Hazaris and so on and so forth, Shishganj and Rakabganj, etc. So when he went there, then he talked about Tairaki ka Mela in the Shamsi ka Talab. And the Tairaki ka Mela, the swimming competition there. And the person who actually won it, as Khushwant Singh Ji said, he would be called Veer Machli. Achha. And it was so parallel, because you are talking about water heritage of this city, which is so interesting about being in the Aravallis and so on and so forth. And then Nazir Akbar Abadi, who was born in Delhi and went to Agra, they did an entire poem. किस चीज पे उन्होंने नहीं फकीरी और कविता लिखी है, and he did this entire thing on Tairaki ka Mela of Agra. So, there are these interlinkings of all kind of cultural nuances, which what is mystery? That's something you don't know about. And that is mystery. Yeah. So whether it is the fakir in Firozshah Kotla, or the Djinns, and or whether it is Shah Turkman. So the gate of Turkman. And no one really knows who this man is, but there's a monastery, the Turkman gate, and there's a little monastery after him. So I went there with a very good German friend and a couple of others. And we reached there at twilight. And as usual, there were a lot of graves in the dargah. And we were just crossing over where the light was coming and the khadim was sitting. And suddenly this khadim came out and said, Khabardar! So I said, what happened? Don't you dare step on the graves. ये जो बुजुर्ग हैं, all these wise men who are buried, ये बड़े गरम खून के हैं. They get very angry. And we got really scared. And suddenly, out of the blue, we saw cats coming out, black cats. And they had abnormal eyes. They were bulging eyes, almost 3-dimensional. I swear, this is not God. And then, everyone got very scared. And he said, ye sare Djinns hain. So, the way, and then we went inside and he talked about this famous tea party. So then there was another tea. So where Jama Masjid is, it's a little hill called Bhojla Pahar. Bhojla was supposed to be a highway robber, Daku tha. And these were pre-Mughal days, and there were forests there. People would come and, meditate. That is how Shah Turkman came there. It was a peaceful, forested area. So in Barat Jari thi, a wedding party was going. And Bhojla Daku got after them. So the wedding party ran into this little place, the hospice of Shah Turkman, ye jo jahan par baithe the. He said, hum bacha lijiye, we save us. So Shah Turkman, un dino chai vai to hoti nahi thi, wo kuch sharbat वगैरह पी रहे होंगे. He said, okay, and he hid the entire wedding party in his cup. So the khadim said, कि वो जो कप है, वो इस दीवार में जो मेरे पीछे की जो दीवार है उसमें है. अगर आप 11-12 बजे तक यहाँ रहेंगी तो आप आज भी नगाड़े सुन सकती हैं. So the idea of celebration within these tales, with the tales, and it just goes on. Yasmin, it just goes on, and the more you discover these,
there's more to discover. But so interestingly, because I was just thinking, you mentioned Bombay. And I was thinking of the difference that in Delhi, because we have this rich history, we kind of, our imagination goes backwards with these stories. Whereas Bombay, their thing is more forward looking through the fictional Bollywood industry being there. They imagine the stories they're going to portray.
That's not true, because Bombay has these little spaces which are not so spoken about. For instance, the Kanheri Cave, which are called the Sanjay Gandhi Park. These go back, they are Buddhist caves, and they have Buddhas as tall as the ones that are in Bamiyan.
Really?
Yes, right there. And they have, it's a part of the trade route and the guilds of merchants, and they have a fantastic hydraulic system within the caves, and they are less spoken caves. So everyone talks about the Elephanta caves.
Oh, and this is
right there. So actually Bombay is in some ways not really spoken of, but there is a lot. Or the Reserve Bank Coin Museum. Very few people know that. Or the history of the naval docks.
Yeah, that.
And of
but
course,
it's not spoken about.
It's not spoken about. Or even the migration, even if you're looking at the films, the migration of all these Ruby Mayers and Salochnas and Suraiya. I remember my father, when he passed out of Allahabad University, there was a craze of Suraiya.
Yes.
So he went and somebody said, ये उनकी जो बग्गी है वो रोज यहाँ से जाती है, Marine Drive.
That's story.
So my father actually, he opened his whole door with 2 other friends and waited for Suraiya for 3 days.
Really? Did he get a glimpse of
He did.
Yeah, okay. Then, coming back to Delhi, How do you think Sufism fits into the natural fabric of how Delhi is?
देखिए पुराने ज़माने में कहावत है because I work a lot on the oral histories. People have worked on the built history. I work on the oral intangible histories. So there is there in all the records that I came across, there was this one record which says that there was so you have Moinuddin Chishti Sahab in Ajmer, and he gave his baton to Qutub Sahab. So the Chishti silsila is most prominent. However, you do have a couple of Naqshband and Kalandaris, like the Matka Peer.
I wanted to, in fact, come to that with you. Is that everybody knows of the dargah of Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia, but there are many more Sufi saints which are all over the city.
Absolutely. So there's a Naqshband dargah very close to where Razia Sultania Mathya Mahal, and it's very quiet. So when there's complete chaos, you get into the space of utter silence. And the Naqshbands, they don't use music as zikr, like the Chishtis, but they use yogic practices or breathing.
Even now?
Even now. The meditation is very close to the yogic practices. And so there's an overlaying of an interplay of different kinds of ideas and cultural nuances. India has been home to a lot of migratory ideas because of constant migration. When we look at Sufism, this is only post 7th century. But even prior to that, a lot of the Persianate culture, which is pre-Islamic, which goes even beyond Alexander in 3rd century BC, and how Seleucus Nicator then becomes, he sends his ambassadors and they become a part of this. And as a dance scholar, I have discovered many images in the Zoroastrian period of the Persianate world within the context of Delhi and many other places. So, this writing, as I said, defining culture, I think one of the best ways to define culture is language. Like whether it's Hindi, Sanskrit, Urdu, or which was born, or Urdu born here, but it's also Persianate. So Sufism, when you go into the family histories of a lot of the Khadims today, you find that they all, many of them were merchants. And they were here for trade. Many of them came
from the Chisti and the Naqshbandi.
Everywhere you go, they somehow had histories related to trade. And that is very interesting. And then they took to Sufism. Now, I have written a lot about how Sufism, because it's a part of the Bhakti movement, it's personalized. And even today, Khwaja Hassan Nizami Sani, who was my guru, who helped me to understand, because I'm not a Muslim, but he helped me to understand what is this. He said that, in a mosque, people who are Muslims go to pray, but in our dargahs, everyone can come to pray. It's a home of friendship. And आज भी कितने भी कोई कट्टर हो अपने अपने religion, people wouldn't miss a chance to go and tie a thread in Ajmer or in Delhi, Hazrat Nizamuddin. And there's a bonhomie because people, so 3 or 4 ways that Sufism sort of went into the hearts of people, and it continues to be a living heritage. One is the adoption of langar.
Yes.
Or the common kitchen.
Which is, even today in many places.
Yes,
still works.
And which was also inspiring Guru Nanak Sahab as well. And the common kitchen is, the more you go west in Gujarat, in Rajasthan, you find that because of the respect to complete vegetarianism, they always serve khichdi.
Yeah.
Which everyone can see. So food is the way to the hearts. Yeah. So that is one.
Yeah.
A second is music. In the Chishti silsila, the music you have, many times you find the mention of Krishna and Radha. in their music. So everybody can identify. Music is very unifying. Everybody sings, and look at the popularity of the Sufi music all over the world. It's become like a marketing brand. The third, of course, is that all these little the khadims or the caretakers of the dargah, they provide a lot of solutions to worldly problems and act like psychologists. So they give you talismans, they give you taweez, or they give you some rituals to do. Somebody's not getting married, somebody's business has gone down, somebody's had a fight, some property dispute. So they have what is called their hujras, or their little cells, which I call psychological clinics, and people go there.
We were doing an episode on Sufism, and I felt exactly like that. This is you're almost being a psychologist to have to understand what the person coming to you needs and wants.
And कि आप ये कर लीजिए, आप वो कर लीजिए. So it's very much a psychological department, and people feel happy coming there. Nobody feels alienated. So it's a home of, and that is how Sufism came to be in Delhi as well.
So, we were talking about the intangible heritage and, how storytelling, but tell me, how does storytelling help to preserve these heritage, these little stories which like you also been telling us?
So way back, my guru, one of my PhD guides, and the main one, Professor Narayani Gupta, big name with regard to Delhi's history. Narayani ji was the one who started the concept of Delhi walks. But her time was when it was advocacy to whether it was for the School of Planning and Architecture, and it was started under the aegis of Citizen Awakening, initiated by Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, the grandmother of revival of Indian crafts and cottage industries, and much more. So Narayani ji was a part of the environmental group, and she started this awakening. And as a student, when I would go for my PhD discussions with her to Jamia Millia Islamia in the Department of Culture and History, she would be taking out a coffee and talking about the walks she did. And that sort of got me very intrigued. When I did my PhD, because I was a dancer, I did my BA from St. Stephen's College in English, then my history, and then my PhD also in history. I didn't get a job. And I also did Guru Shishya Parampara, learning in art history, in archaeology, in languages, and I didn't get a job. So Madam didn't get a job, so Madam initiated something called Window to the Indian Arts at the Alliance Francaise de Delhi. And I impounded my jewelry. And those days, it was 1997 when I did this. There was only a fax machine. There were no internet as such. And I would sit on a fax and I would fax, and we used to have a government directory with all the details of different embassies, because who would want to pay for culture? And I started a startup of Heritage Walk in 1997.
97, okay.
And these classes I did, I had about, over a course of 5-7 years, I had about 400 diplomats who became, and corporate had just started coming, multinationals, so people from Perfity India and American Express and so on and so forth, Fiat, PNB Paribas.
What would your fax say, which you were sending out?
So my fax would say, now Dr. Navina Jafa invites you for Window to the Indian Arts at the Alliance Francaise on Wednesday. Then it changed to Friday or whatever. And the lecture, we used to have the slide projectors. The slide would go and get stuck in between. You didn't have to PowerPoint presentation. And I would say, today we are having stepwells and Jal Tarang. So I would have for 30 minutes of the lecture, which I would prepare, or I would get someone to do it. I would charge them 3,000 rupees for taking any 10 classes. Okay, so 300 rupees per class. And in that, there were 2 UN diplomats who said, we are amateur musicians. How do you learn music and dance without not writing? So I said, chalo, come with me to Ustad Iqbal Sahab in Sui Walan in Chandni Chowk. So that was my first heritage walk. और वो गर्मी में, उस उमस में, अगस्त की गर्मी में, सड़ी हुई गर्मी में. So there was the Colombian ambassador, there was the CEO of Perfetti India and 2 other people. And I told Khan साहब आप बोलचा पे किसी को भेज दीजिएगा, फिर हम आपके घर में, और भाभी से कह दीजिएगा कि बिस्लेरी की बोतल मंगवा लेंगे. बिस्लेरी हैड कम, और रुमाली रोटी मंगवा दीजिएगा, भाभी से कहिएगा कबाब बनवा लेंगे. और I had inquired that none of them were vegetarians. And so Ustad Iqbal Sahab, he sent his younger brother Anis Sahab, Ustad Iqbal Sahab from the Delhi Gharana of Music. Anis Sahab aye, and we became the tourist attraction rather than we seeing something, because suddenly you have a whole host of foreigners coming into these back lanes of Sui Walan behind Gulcha Cinema. And we walked. We went to the Chat. And Khan Sahab took out this 250-year-old Tanpura with ivory work, which was a part of Bahadur Shah Safar and Mia Tandras and things like that. And because it was the monsoon time, he began to sing Panch Dhang Ki Malhar. And I got up and I started dancing the Mayur. And then little did I know that from all the balconies, everyone was watching us. And so that was my first heritage walk. And
performance.
And yeah, so then you started using a hashtag, performing heritage.
You started using a hashtag?
Called performing heritage.
How lovely.
So how do you bring buildings alive? How do you bring stories? And that expanded, and I found now I started the Ramzan walk, for instance, and then the Pul Balon Ki Sair, then I did a whole one I do about 16 thematic walks, and now my book is coming out called Exhibiting India. My first book, which was called Performing Heritage, The Art of Exhibit Walks, is specifically on Delhi. And the second one, which is coming out next month from the Ministry of INB, is called Exhibiting India, The Art of Heritage
Walks. I have
to
come with you on one of these.
Of course.
Very, very soon.
Zarur.
But, we were talking of storytelling and, how that tells stories. It also tells the stories of the marginalized. And your PhD is on the Tawaifs.
One part of
it, the issues in the Tawaifs. And they're not much on them in recorded history. Tawaifs, but the fact is they played important roles in culture of freedom fighters, voices of opposition, and so much more. In fact, when I was reading up on Tawaifs of India, I just noticed the flipping channels that Netflix is coming up with this Hira Mandi. And it is about their role in the national movement, Sanjay Leela Bhansali's. So I was happy to see that. I don't know what the show is like, but I've just seen the promo.
Yeah. So the thing is that, first of all, the nomenclature Tawaif has to be clarified. Tawaf-un-nissa. Tawaf, which means actually the Kaaba ke charo taraf jana. And it's a very unspoken community. It took me 20 years to understand what the society of Tawaifs is. First of all, the word Tawaif itself gets publicized, started getting used only in the 19th century. Prior to that, they had different other classes of public performers. Kishan Maharaji, the great tabla player from Banaras, and Bismillah Khan Sahab, with whom I did a heritage walk in Dal Mandi of Banaras on Tawaifs, and which was looking at all kinds of places, including the famous Aga Harsh's house. So, ek Baltan Bai thi, Banaras mein, who had given refuge to Chandrasekhar Azad. Yes, and the police never came there. Then you had the role of the public women during 1857, when they gave their jewelry to so many of the rebels to sustain themselves. But more than that, the very fact that it was a very complex society which no one talks about. So you have either an Umrao Jan of Ruswa Hadi, not Muzaffar Ali. It's a novel by Murza. And then this whole Kalpana that, she was a real person. So if you go to Lucknow in the Chowk, suddenly people will say, Ye Umrao Jan ka ghar hai. But Umrao Jan, there could be somebody called Umrao Jan, but it wasn't the story. It's a part of that culture. The most genuine film on the Tawaifs is by Kamal Amrohi because of the background that they came from, Mina Kumari and so on and so forth. Gulabi Koti and so, many, many others thing. But again, when you talk about Tawaifs, they are divided into castes. They are divided into classes. They have panchayats, they have chaudrayans, they have a chaudhry.
And this is different from the caste and the class system, which is...
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the way they have been called in different places changes. And then what Bismillah Khan Sahab and Kishan Maharaj, and so I wrote a afsana called Aina Jan. Yours truly was Aina Jan. And it was a complete flop show. Yasmin, every publisher rejected it. But
what was it about?
It was a first-person journey into the Tawaif world. But anyway, so now I'm redoing it with a couple of friends, and hopefully it's like going to be an encyclopedia.
I would love to read it.
And it's on all kinds of understanding of the society in different ways. And it was all that material actually is a lived material of what they told me personally.
How many years have you worked on this?
So I started my research in 87. And because I am a Kathak dancer, my Guru Pandit Birju Maharaji, with his help, I was able to get into Banaras and then to Rampur. There was another dynamics in Rampur, then Agra, Sitapur, Lakhimpur, Badaयूं, Hilyabai, and all these people. You haven't heard of them. And I collected their tales, even if they were one little lines about them. कोई मीरासी मिल गया, कोई ढाड़ी मिल गया, कोई उनके रक्षक मिल गए. And then I have categorized according to Bismillah Khan Sahab and Anand Krishan Rai of Banaras. I have given them, I have formally introduced this Kalajivi or Dehjivi. So generic term may be Tawaif.
You mentioned Tawaif means the
circumambulation of the Kaaba. So Tawaf-un-nissa. So basically it was a metaphor of women who were mobile. When they started so you have Nashtar, one of the early Urdu novels, where you get the description of what is called the fishing fleet. You know what is fishing fleet? Men would come here to work in the East India Company, etc. And the women would endanger themselves to cross over, hoping to get the right man on the other side of the ocean, and they would be called the fishing fleet. The women
here,
no, from England.
Oh, they would
come here to get married, and of course malaria and perfumes and all the whatever. But they wanted to come here, the Mem Sahibs, to look for the men here, which you have a little bit in Lagam, a little of that snippet, of that kind of sociological ideas. But coming back to Tawaifs, when they start, so you have in Nashtar the description, which Kurtul had translated as the Nautch Girl. So there you have this description of how this man feels the pride of hosting a camp of the Tawaifs, of the Nautch Girls, the Nachis. So they're called by different names. And it's interesting because I was able to interview some of the tutors who would be called to educate these women. Some of the craftspeople who would feel the pleasure that the Tawaif, who never was in the Ghungat, she was the one with her face open, would be the fashionista of the time. And he would be using her as a fashion model. So these are the nuances I've documented. They're not part of my main PhD document because the Tawaifs were also the largest Kathak dancers. But their repertoire was more of music than of the dance because that's how they were public performers. Whether it is a story of Chappan Churi, Janki Bai Chappanchuri Ilhabadi. The whole story of gramophone records, and Gohar Jan is the only one, but there are many, many others. So it's a fascinating world of very empowered women who were, in the name of creating respectability of classical Greek arts, of classifying the Indian performing arts as classical, the first tragedy was marginalization of these women. So it could only be cleansed and called classical once the women went out.
No, just imagine. What would be the historical significant context? Sorry, not the same. The historical context of the even the Hijras in cultural literature. They're another community which have been completely wiped out. From culture.
So you have the great general of Alauddin Khilji, etc., Malik Kafur, and many others many others who have played a great role as generals, etc. They were the only ones allowed in the harem as well as the men.
during the Mughal time and all
But
this.
now, for instance, the Hijron ki Masjid in Mehroli.
Yes, I've seen that.
And
in your, YouTube thing, yes.
Hijron ki Masjid. And who are these people? For them, their identity is not being a Muslim. Their identity is that of a Hijra. And how are they repositioning themselves? And they have now have access to health, public health facilities, to education, and much more. It's a very difficult life. When I'm talking about cultural technocrat and technocracy, is also looking at all these marginalized people and looking at ways to reposition this skill for economic sustainability.
Are there any cultural traditions or practices which are associated with the Hijras and or the Tawaif culture? Still, nothing at all.
See, because I'll give you one example. One of my resource persons who is no more, Allama Gulzar Zurshi, he and a couple of others were very kind enough to take me gully to look at all these nuances, where they were, who their patrons were, and so on. So Allama Gulzar Zurshi told me about Kalka Wali, and he talked about how she told him when they were relocated, and the Tawaifs had a great battle with the municipal corporation in Delhi. There were 3 or 4 places around Delhi where the Tawaifs were. It was Badi Chowri, Jhandewala, and Roshanara. These were the 3 areas. Couple of others, but these were the main 3 areas. They were evicted out, but they fought a great battle. And fortunately, the lady who led the battle, Mumtaz Chaudhry, I spoke to her son and Dilbar Malik, and he gave me all the court papers where they and how they prepared that, and the to fight the cases. But the whole idea was to give them a separate locality. Finally, they were allotted what is known as the GB Road, and that has an irony about it because it's the Great Bastion Road. And the person who spearheaded their eviction was Swami Shraddhanand of the Arya Samaj movement. And so the GB Road was found, and unfortunately now GB Road has been renamed as Swami Shraddhanand Marg.
Oh, okay. That's one for irony. Tell me, the Hijra community also has a strong mystical connection to the Sufis, which
no, it
not
isn't.
really?
No, not really. Because in Sufism, everybody is really treated
Equal.
Of course, there's a gender divide. There's a very strong gender divide in Sufism.
Yeah, of course.
There's a gender divide.
Let me for both these communities, I guess oral histories were the only way to preserve their stories. And have you come across any stories like that which are about the communities within the communities?
Not on the Hijras, but for instance, the snake charmers, they have these wonderful stories, because they said, जब बारिश होती है and all the holes get filled up, so they're often called by the police in the police stations where snakes turn up, and so these, you know,
these
so
are
they're
these old.
called. So now a lot of snake charmers have visiting cards saying that because Shehnai has been replaced by the bean. So they play the bean in, in the various shadis. But the second thing they have on the visiting card, the business card, is अगर सांप निकल आए तो हमको बुला देना, mobile number so and so, you know.
Arts have always required the support of patrons. And the loss of patronage and the decline of the zamindari system, and also the rise of religious nationalism, has impacted patronage for.
I won't say that. I won't say that because जैसे हमारे सपेरे हैं, वो तो हिंदू हैं, है ना? अब their family kul devta is, they all want to aspire for because the Sapera community, according to another scholar, Madan Meena, there are about 6 or 7 skills they have. The women
besides.
have. Yeah, so besides. So even so that's what I'm saying, the skill mapping. So the Sapera community was not only catching snakes and showing them and doing musical programs and entertainment programs, but they know how to treat snake bites. So they know herbs. They make their own instruments of bean and tumba, which is a percussionist. So they are craftspeople. The women are also kalbelia dancers. And a part of the Sapera community are also stone cutters. And some of them are basket makers also. So there are about 5 or 6 skills associated with the Sapera community.
Fascinating.
So like the Sapera we work with, for instance, Shishanaji, the Sanskritization or the upward mobility in terms of high Hinduism, he would say Jai Bholenath, because the snake is related to Shiva. So in the middle, he would call me on Holi and he said, Jai Shri Ram. I said, Aapke Jai Bholenath kahan gaye? He says, season ki baat hoti hai, madam. So, the practical, what I've learned from the street performers, जो बिल्कुल फकीरी में रहते हैं, कि भाई जैसा देश वैसा भेष. What is patron? You have all kinds of, from Dilip Kumar, who was Yusuf Khan. This has not been something recent. People, हर आदमी बहरूपिया है. Everybody is an imposter. So, and you have to learn from these street performers वो कैसे अपने आप को बदल देते. And they have some amazing ways of, looking, and they have so much of humor. So I'll give you an example. There was a magician, a street magician of Delhi called Rahman Sahab. Rahman Shah passed away. His son, Junaid, is a wonderful magician as well. So all these street magicians have an apprentice, and they call these apprentices Jamuras. So Rahman Shah and his Jamura were invited to participate in the street magic, festival in Germany. So they went there. They were hosted in a hotel, and every morning they had to report to the police booth, and they would be given the duty for the day. Today you go and do your show in a mall. Today you go here. Today you go there. So one day they went, and they were told that their duty is a nude park. So, my friend, my colleague and I, we looked at Rahman Shah, and he said, what is he going to say? And he said, Didi, the whole day, the whole way we were going Nange Wale Park में, हमारी तो ये नहीं समझ में आ रहा है, जब नंगे हैं तो पैसे कैसे देंगे हमें? So, just as Shishanaji said कि भाई season की बात है, तो भाई.
But psychologically, this is also oriented towards finding patronage, na? Because that is so important.
Patronage, but it's simple ways. It's jugaad. It's basically it's a jugaad to survive. So, भाई इस करवट उठ बैठ गया, उस करवट उठ बैठ गया. How does it get?
The बात है, this is because they
जिंदा है. जब तक श्वास है तब तक आशा अपना रंग रूप बदल लो.
But tell me, how obviously patronage is extremely important for culture in all forms. And today, in a time like today, when how can this culture of patronage kind of be revived? And if you're not completely dependent on the government, and you can see, okay, the government is doing different things, so they have their own priorities.
So actually, we've come, Yasmin, in a circle.
Full circle.
Full circle, because when I talked about cultural technocracy, it was basically about skill application. How do you upgrade the skills? And how do you look at innovations in skill application? So, for instance, in 2019, I was commissioned by the Election Commission of India to use the street performers for voters' education. And the mudda they gave us, the issue they gave us, that the women who are not registered, who are registered, why don't they come out to vote? Because there was this whole thing about so many lakhs of women who are registered voters don't come out to vote, the missing voters. There was this huge thing. So we created a Beharupiya Yatra. Now,
This is in Delhi only.
Delhi, no, this was in Rajasthan, but it was done here. And the Bahurupiyas we have used even for corporate personality development and public speaking.
अच्छा.
Because बोलता बहुत है मेरी तरह बहुत बोलता है बहुरूपिया. So the बहुरूपिया यात्रा हमने करी. और बहुरूपिया यात्रा में उसमें cross dressers भी थे, उसमें men who have dressed as, who like dressing up as women, cross dressers bhi the, acrobats bhi the, falana bhi tha. And we did surveys while the Nukkad Nataks were going on. And after which we found that the women are not coming out to vote because चाहे वो सरकार आए, चाहे वो सरकार आए, पानी की समस्या नहीं खत्म होती है. And the whole day the women have to look for water. So then after that, we did a Jal Yatra, the Beharupiya Jal Yatra, and for women to create Pani Ki Panchayats and on water harvesting. Unfortunately, COVID came and, we had to stop it. But it's all about, I went to the DM. He was the same one who was there in the election. And I said, this is all about repositioning the skills for skill application. So automatically, when you create value for the society, then whatever it is, whatever hunar is there, whatever kaushalta, whatever skill is there, there's a patron, there's an economics about it. But if you want to preserve it the way it is, then, and you don't give ideas of how they can remold themselves, then the skill will die. It's with any skill.
Yeah, but that would definitely need intervention.
So that is what I'm saying. Yeah. So I have been really trying to awaken people that you call me and I will help you to reposition these skills, whether it is in the sector of heritage tourism, whether it is in the sector of development communication, because a lot of these rural areas don't have any entertainment. Bijli nahi aati hai. Internet nahi hota hai. So these street performers can matter a lot.
Yeah. And coming to Delhi, what are the other communities that we wouldn't know? We talked about Tawaifs, the Hijras, you talked about the snake charmers, the magicians.
Yeah.
What other communities?
कठपुतली वाले हैं, बाजीगर हैं, acrobats और ये सब हैं. बहुत तरीके की चीजें हैं. फिर अलग अलग गाने की विधियां हैं, अलग अलग रस्में होती थी. People from Kovar Sham would go to Yog Maya during Janmashtami, गाना गाते हुए जाते थे. ये प्रथाएं होती थी. फिर कालका का मेला इतना बड़ा हुआ करता था. उसके बाद आज कुछ चीजें हैं जिंदा, जैसे बसंतें हजरत निजामुद्दीन में है, मगर दूसरी बसंतें तवाइफों की शाह बुला चौक में हुआ करती थी. बड़ी मजेदार बसंतें हुआ करती थी. पर किसने देखा? फिर दंगल हुआ करते थे. दंगल क्या होते थे? दंगल होते थे जब दिस वाज एन इनफॉर्मल कम्युनिटी गैदरिंग, महफिल होती थी ऑफ परफॉर्मिंग आर्टिस्ट. और जो सबसे बड़ा होता था, बुजुर्ग होता था, वो ऊंचे तख्त पे बैठता था, and the rest of the people would be sitting down and one by one they would be giving a हाजरी. अब मैंने अगर मान लीजिए कोई बंदिश करी, तिटकदकदी गिनधा, और मैंने खत्म कर दी अपनी बंदिश, तो जो दूसरा आएगा वो उसका जोड़ा बनाएगा. कथकदिगिनधा तिटकथकदिगिनधा.
But I remember seeing these when I was a kid, but the mushairas and these
Exactly.
and all was so, and
so I think, Yasmin, these heritage walks which have become so popular. Unfortunately, the bad thing about the heritage walks today is कि हिंदी में नहीं होती है. Local languages में नहीं होती.
Also, I think that before we started talking and the podcast, we were talking about social media, and I feel while there are great benefits and there's reach and this thing, there is also a kind of superficiality which comes in, and while heritage walks are most welcome, and I would say the more the better, but I kind of feel that some kind of lack the depth or the knowledge. So they're just doing it for the sake of doing it because it's also an in thing at this point of time.
I agree with you, and there should be a sense of inclusivity. And the inclusivity comes only in bhasha. I think one of the greatest part of my career has been empowerment of the marginalized in understanding their city through the heritage walks. And I'm not talking about people who are in the corporate or the government. I'm talking about really marginalized people on the footpath. So Sheila Dikshit ji had, there is an organization called Shahjahanabad Redevelopment Corporation, and I was appointed the heritage consultant by Sheila ji. And one of the things I told ma'am was that I would like to do special walks for the footpath people on the street. So they started calling me Bhopu Wali Madam. So I would land up every Sunday with a Bhopu. लाल भोपू था वो जैसे पुलिसमैन का होता था आओ भाइयों बहनों दिल्ली की कहानी सुनो. So it was like a dastaan going in the
but for the marginalized. Why were you doing that?
I told her that the sense of belonging, because it was also the time when a lot of the women, there was that terrible case of the girl getting raped and things like that. And I realized that a lot of these men who migrate, they have a sense of anonymity in Delhi, where they feel they can get away with crime. And so it's also this how to create, for whatever time period you are in Delhi, a sense of belonging. I once asked many people, to whom does the old Delhi belong to? The shopkeepers who come at 11 o'clock and leave at 8? Or the people who are there 24/7 eating langars in Shishganj Gurudwara or wherever? Who it actually belongs to the footpath worker on the street, because that person is there along with the residents who stay there 24/7. So I didn't realize how many people's life I touched. But one day when I went to Hazrat Nizamuddin, and the pool wala said, "आप आज ऐसे ही ले जाइए." मैंने कहा फिर मेरी मुराद नहीं लगेगी. मेरी वो नहीं लगेगी, हाजिरी नहीं लगेगी. आप एक रुपए क्यों ले जाओ? अरे आपसे तो हर संडे इतनी सारी कहानियां सुनते हैं. So, the connectivity of, and I realized that the second thing I did was training CBSE teachers in establishing multidimensional, multidisciplinary heritage clubs, and the Heritage Lab being a platform for multidisciplinary learning. So for instance, in schools. So I trained over 5,000 teachers in CBSE or in Kashmir, Jharkhand, UP, Delhi and NCR, Haryana, and Maharashtra. And showed them the ways of how to create multidisciplinary ways, and also how to contribute to the conservation. Whether it is adopting a river and looking at that, and looking at all the stories of the rivers, how many people use the river, what do they do on the river, and all the old tales of the river. Kitni nawein jati thi, kahan jati thi.
Yeah, and stories are a great way to
exactly
to make people interested and invested also in.
Yeah, and to sum up, Yasmin, these kind of initiatives which one did as a younger person, one doesn't realize ki kahan se kahan log pahunch jate hain. So I did a walk in Bada Hindu Rao, where there's an observatory. Which is called Gaib Peer, because there's a belief that a Sufi saint comes and wo gaib ho jate, the vanishing saint, which R.V. Smith had also written in Statesman about. So I got this bunch of people, but I also got Wing Commander Rakesh Sharma here, and
Rakesh Sharma.
Yeah, and I referred to him, and I said, this is an observatory, but it's also the heritage of science of stars and this and that and everything, and I gave them a lot of stories of how the desert people look at stars and they walk through, and the various ways that people engage for directions, for light and this and that and everything, and poetry. And one of these children actually has gone to NASA. And he said it was that heritage walk which transformed my life.
Oh my God.
And how did he connect? He connected with on the Facebook. So
and how wonderful that must make you.
वो बहुत बढ़िया लगता है इन चीजों का कि आप लोगों ने कहा कि हमारी जिंदगी आपने बदल दी. मैंने कहा अच्छा भाई बदल ली.
No, but thank you, Navina ji, and I hope you go on to change many more lives and affect more lives like that. And you're truly right that Delhi really belongs to every Delhi wala, even those passing through. So here's to Delhi and Delhi walas, and thank you so much for joining us.
Delhi salam आपको भी.
Delhi salam.
Delhi salam.
That's a new one.
Delhi has always had room to grow and allow for all kinds of stories. What would you like to hear me talk about next? Do write in, comment and let us know. Join us next time as we explore Delhi's hidden gems, people, places and stories on Delhi Love, Ishq Muhabbat Pyaar. I'm Yasmin Kidwai. Until next time.